There's recent evidence of a slowdown in the housing market here in the UK. Geographically, London appears to be the drag. What are the dynamics at play? Well, Jeremy Leaf, a fellow at the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors and the former chief of the residential branch of the RICS. He also owns the estate agency.
Tonight, going for growth to tackle a housing crisis. The government slashes targets for affordable homes in London as house building faces a perfect storm. But could the government and the Mayor of London now face a political storm, accused of betraying election promises and of throwing low-income Londoners?
Right now, whether you're sitting at home, commuting, or casually scrolling, something monumental is happening beneath your feet, something that will reshape every corner of the UK housing market in ways most people won't fully understand until it's far too late. The story so far is simple. House prices are sliding. Estate agents are whispering, lenders are nervous. But the real story, the one you're not supposed to hear, is deeper, darker, and far more intentional than anyone in power wants to admit. For years, London was the heartbeat of Britain's property boom, an engine that pumped life into the entire national market. But today, that engine is sputtering. According to Jeremy Leaf, a fellow at the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors and former head of its residential division, the warning signs aren't just visible, they are glaring. The foundations are shifting. The signals are unmistakable. Yet somehow, the general public remains completely unaware of the scale of what's unfolding. Government ministers stand in front of cameras and insist they are tackling the housing crisis, but behind the scenes they've quietly slashed affordable housing targets, especially in London, where the affordability emergency is most severe. Critics say ministers have abandoned their promises and are leaving millions of renters to face the consequences alone. But that political drama? That's only the surface. Because what's happening underneath is far larger, far more calculated, and far more consequential than a simple broken promise. So stop whatever you're doing. Clear your mind. Because what you're about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about the UK housing market. The mainstream narrative, that prices are in a harmless dip, a temporary correction, is not only misleading. It's dangerously incomplete. What we're witnessing is not an accident. It's not a natural market cycle. It's a deliberate, carefully orchestrated reset that has been in motion for more than 2 years. And here's the part almost nobody wants to acknowledge. The government isn't just aware of this reset. They are actively facilitating it. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through the 3 hidden forces intentionally pushing UK house prices downward. Forces powerful enough to erase up to 30% of your property's value in the next 18 months. But more importantly, I'll show you who stands to profit. Because in every collapse, every crash, every crisis, someone always profits. And in this one, the winners are already lining up. But before we get into the 3 forces, let me ask you something. Have you noticed the silence? Estate agents who once chased you relentlessly have suddenly gone quiet. Homes that used to spark bidding wars are now sitting unsold for months. The pipeline has frozen. Activity has collapsed. That isn't random. That's phase 1 of a deeper structural shift, one that the public has not been prepared for. You've heard the headlines. Biggest drop since 2008. But here's the difference. In 2008, the government scrambled to save the market. They bailed out banks, froze the system, propped up prices. This time, they're doing none of that. They're doing the opposite. They're letting the market fall, and in some cases, pushing it. And if that sounds exaggerated, consider this. Last month, I had a private conversation with a senior banker from one of the UK's largest mortgage lenders. What he told me was chilling. His words: "We're preparing for default levels we haven't seen in 15 years. His team's internal forecasts show that at least 40% of people who bought homes in the last 3 years will be in negative equity by next summer. Think about that for a moment. Nearly half of recent buyers could soon owe more than their homes are worth. That is not a soft landing. That is a financial earthquake. But here's the part he said that kept me awake that night. The Bank of England has been quietly preparing lenders for this outcome since early January. Meaning, they knew this was coming. They planned around it. And instead of preventing it, they accelerated it. So how exactly are they accelerating it? Let's start with the most powerful tool in the economic arsenal: interest rates. Yes, interest rates were raised aggressively. But the reason behind those rate hikes is no longer inflation. Inflation peaked long ago, from 11.1% at its height down to 3.9%. And yet interest rates remain locked at 5.25%. Why? Because, according to internal Treasury documents leaked earlier this year, the government and the Bank of England are pursuing what they call a controlled correction of house prices. Their target is explicit: a 25 to 35% real terms drop by the end of 2025. Why crash prices so aggressively? Because for years, the biggest global investors, sovereign wealth funds, private equity giants, pension giants, international financial institutions, have been locked out of UK residential property. Prices were too high. Yields were too low. The profit wasn't worth the risk. But drop prices by 30%. And entire neighborhoods become buyout opportunities. Interest rates are the first tool. But the second tool? That one is more deceptive, more political, and far more powerful: the Renters' Reform Bill. On its surface, it appears to protect tenants. No more Section 21, more rights, more oversight. But dig deeper, and you'll see a different picture. Small landlords, the backbone of the UK rental sector, are being squeezed harder than ever before. Delays in tribunals, higher compliance, longer eviction processes, more responsibilities, more risk, less protection. Institutional landlords, however, aren't affected the same way. They operate with different structures, different contracts, and different legal pathways that allow them to avoid the traps that crush smaller landlords. The result? Nearly half of all small landlords say they plan to sell within the next 12 months. And who's buying those homes? Not first-time buyers. Not young families. Not local people. But global capital. Blackstone has prepared a £10 billion fund just for UK homes. Goldman Sachs, £8 billion. JP Morgan, £6 billion. And that's just the beginning. These firms use automated systems, AI-driven algorithms, that scan every property listing the second it hits the market. They make instant offers. Cash. No delays. No chains. No emotional attachment. You can't compete with that. Most people can't. The third force behind this engineered reset is something almost nobody is discussing: immigration dynamics, but not in the way you think. For years, high immigration, especially from the EU, pushed property demand upward. Young professionals arrived, rented flats, bought city centre homes, and fueled the boom. But now, that trend is reversing. For the first time in decades, net migration from EU countries has gone negative. Tens of thousands of working-age, higher-earning professionals are leaving Britain every year. These are the exact people who historically supported urban housing demand. Meanwhile, immigration from lower-income countries has surged. These new arrivals do not replace the purchasing power lost by the departing EU workforce. Many cannot afford to buy, and many struggle even to rent. The result is a fragmentation of demand, a mismatch between the types of homes available and the types of tenants entering the country. According to internal Home Office projections, this demographic shift alone could reduce housing demand by 15% over the next 2 years. And that brings us to the biggest players of all: sovereign wealth funds. These funds are controlled by foreign governments and together manage over £12 trillion globally. For years, they tried to enter the UK residential market but were blocked by high prices and political resistance. Now, they've been given a clear runway. And they are buying, quietly, aggressively, strategically. Entire developments. Whole apartment blocks. Clusters of houses. Student residences. City centre towers. They're not buying for rent. They are buying for control. And the UK government has made that easier, not harder, through recent regulatory changes that allow these funds to operate with fewer disclosures and less oversight. So where does this all lead? Over the next 18 months, the UK housing market will move through 5 phases. Phase 1, now. Early distress, silent drop in prices, rising listings. Phase 2, March 2025. Mass expiry of pandemic-era fixed rates. Payment shocks. Forced sales. Phase 3, Summer 2025. Negative equity becomes widespread. Panic selling accelerates. Phase 4, late 2025. Prices hit the floor. Institutions buy everything they can. Phase 5, 2026 onward. Supply shrinks, rents explode, and homeownership becomes increasingly unattainable for ordinary families. The outcome? A historic transfer of property ownership from the many to the few. From families to funds. From individuals to global financial structures. So what should you do? Sell early if you must. Prepare for remortgaging. Avoid buying in a falling market. Re-evaluate buy-to-let if you're small scale. And most importantly, share this information. Because the only counter to a coordinated strategy is coordinated awareness. This is not a correction. It's a restructuring. And now that you know the truth, one question remains. What will you do next?